Hello, everybody. This is David, obviously, and I'm going to answer some of the questions. Well, actually, all the questions that have been sent. So let's start with the first one. Special message for Slovenian people before the lecture on March 19th. Well, the the title of the tour is Worldwide Wake Up, and that is precisely what I'm talking about, a worldwide wake up. So, what I'm saying in country after country after country, um, from Australia to California to all over Europe and all the rest, um, is the same. Because what I suggest we need to differentiate between is the perception that people have that they are their name, their culture, their background, their religion, their race, whatever, and the nature of who they really are, which is awareness, a state of being aware. And it's the confusion between the two that create the vast majority of conflict and is responsible for the total confusion that people have about their very nature. Uh, my latest book is called Phantom Self because Phantom Self refers to the self identity that most people have, which is I am my name, I am my race, I am my culture, I am my religion, and so on. When that is not who we are, that is what we are experiencing. What we are is awareness, a state of being aware, which is having those experiences. Now, when we come from a perspective, from a perception that who we are is awareness, and that all awareness is the same awareness ultimately, having different experiences, then we can start to see the unity of everything. I mean, scientists today in studies have, for instance, concluded that trees and plants not only are conscious, but that operate in what they call family groups. And, you know, one of the questions in an article I read about plants having consciousness was, are plants conscious? Well, the answer to that question is simple. Everything, everything is conscious. This is what we forget. We think that apart from humans and animals, things are almost inanimate. They're all conscious. Different levels of consciousness, different states of consciousness, different expressions of consciousness, but all still consciousness, which ultimately is the same consciousness. Now, when you come from this perspective, then division by race, division by culture, division by history starts to collapse because there's the realization and the understanding and the recognition that actually we are all the same consciousness. This is what makes racism so insane. We are all the same awareness. And what has happened with this conspiracy, because this goes well beyond the level of the world of the seen, the world of the five senses. The bottom line of this conspiracy to enslave human perception, because that's what it is. Everything comes from perception. How you perceive things to be dictates how you self-identify and what you self-identify with and as. It dictates what you will support and won't support, what you will do, what you won't do, what you'll challenge and what you won't challenge. It all comes from your perception of self and events. So the bottom line of this conspiracy is the hijacking of human perception and the focusing of human perception on a self-identity and a state of possibility akin to the size of a pea. People who have expanded their awareness beyond the five senses can see the unity of everything. They can see how not only everything is one, they can see how the conspiracy fits together. Because when people talk about, oh, you see a conspiracy everywhere. No, I don't. I see one conspiracy with infinite numbers of faces, numbers of masks. And therefore, if you're going to stop people seeing the conspiracy from a level of awareness that is expanded enough to connect dots and not just see dots in and of themselves, then you've got to pull people's focus of attention out of expanded awareness and into the five senses. Because once our focus and our perceptions are constructed only in the five senses, then we see everything as apart from everything else, with, quote, space in between. We see different colored faces. We see different cultures, different religions, all of it. We see them all as apart from all the others. We see division. We see apartness, which of course is a perfect position through which the few can divide and control the many by setting the many at war with each other and in competition with each other. And that's the world we live in. You know, in the talk in Slovenia, I pull together a vast number of different subjects and people and events and show how they're all connected and to what end. And yet, the vast majority of people in the world will see all those things as completely unconnected and not related to each other in any way, shape, or form. If you can't see the picture, you can only see the pixels, then you're in a position where, A, you cannot understand the world that you're living in. You cannot even understand the nature of self and who we really are. And we are in a perfect position to be played off against each other in divide and rule. And I see that one of these questions talks about, it seems that in Slovenia, the World War II is not finished yet. People, the nation, still divided on white, people who collaborated with Germans and Italians, and red, people who collaborated with partisans and Tito to be partisans. This separation is a huge obstacle for any kind of progress of country and people. What do you suggest how to deal with these resentments? Well, I've just explained it. If people go on self-identifying with their experience, with their name, date, birthplace, not date, their name, life story, and religion, race, whatever, they go on doing that, then nothing's going to change. Because that's how we got into the position we're in, that question highlights. there's only one way to change that, and that's to transform our self-identity from labels, what I call label consciousness, I am this, I am that, to simply I am. I am awareness. Ultimately, all awareness. You know, our focus of attention can be on I am Slovenian, I am Belgian, I am British. And that's a point of attention of infinite awareness. Or you can expand deeper and further into this infinite consciousness and perceive yourself to be just that, infinite consciousness, having an experience. And the way those two states of awareness will see the world are vastly, indescribably different. And so what we're looking at in terms of this global conspiracy, which affects every country and every person in every country, is a conspiracy, which in the end is all psychological, what I call the perception deception, the name of one of my books. It's a psychological conspiracy to get people to be so focused on the world of the five senses, at the exclusion of all that awareness beyond it, to the point where we're no longer influenced by our expanded awareness. We're no longer touched by intuitive knowing that comes from expanded awareness. We only perceive the world of the five senses, where everything is apart from everything else as we perceive it. And we are just little me apart from everyone else. When you think that, according to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is only 0.005%, 0.005% of what exists in the universe in terms of energy, mass, matter, etc. And that visible light, which is the only frequency band that we can see, is a tiny fraction of that 0.005%, what scientists call visible light. This means that the almost entirety of existence in this universe, never mind infinity beyond, is denied to us in terms of visual reality. The amount that we can see, the frequency band that we can see within this infinite forever, is so tiny, it's laughable. And yet, people's focus of attention and the information that people receive through what I call the mainstream everything so concentrates attention and sense of possibility within the five senses that the vast majority of people in the world think that what they can see and hear and touch and taste, etc., is all that exists. It's the most extraordinary perception deception, which holds people in a state of lifelong perceptual servitude, through which they can be played off against other people with different colored faces, different religions, different cultures, different ways of seeing things, who are also in perceptual servitude to a perceptual illusion. So whether it's Slovenia or South Africa or Argentina, doesn't really matter, because the same principles apply everywhere. Linguistic researchers say that Slovenian language originates from the oldest first human language. You cannot speak Slovenian language fluently if you're not born here, and so sophisticated language, dual exact word, widely extended dictionary. But you said that first language was telepathy. Well, there are a few things to this. First of all, outside of the body, our awareness communicates telepathically. I mean, you read endless stories about the experiences of people who've, they're known as near-death experiences, who their body dies briefly and they leave the body. Their awareness, their point of attention, again, leaves the body. And experiences realities beyond that focus of attention. That's what the body is. I call it a biological computer. It focuses attention and on this tiny frequency band called visible light, because that's all it can decode. It's like this computer in front of me now. If you know what you're doing, you can firewall off this computer so that it only reads a tiny part of the internet. They do this, of course, in China. And this is what the body is. It focuses attention on the five senses. And if people are not in a state of more expanded awareness beyond the five senses, then the five senses is all that they can see and all that they can perceive to exist. So outside of the body, as these near-death experiences constantly describe, it's thought transfer. There's no words. There's just thought decoded to hear the thought. And, you know, that's not a million miles from what's happening in terms of language. I did a video cast recently on my website where I asked the question, does a falling tree make a noise? And the answer to the question was, only if we hear it. Which sounds strange, except that it's true. When a tree falls, it doesn't make a noise. What it does is vibrationally disturb the air, the atmosphere. What then happens is this disturbance, this vibrational disturbance, is then picked up by the ear as a frequency, or a certain band of that frequency. And the hearing senses turn that vibrational disturbance into an electrical signal, which is communicated to the brain. And the brain decodes that electrical signal into the sound that we hear of a tree falling. In other words, the noise of the tree falling only exists in our head when a vibrational disturbance has been decoded into the sound of a tree falling. And it's the same with language. What am I doing now as I'm speaking? My vocal cords are creating frequency fields, vibrating frequency fields. That's why the vocal cords create vibration. And passing between me talking now and you hearing are not words. They are a vibrating information field. What then happens is your ears pick up that waveform vibration frequency, turn it into an electrical signal and communicate it to your brain, which then decodes that electrical signal into the words you think you're hearing, which only exist when you have decoded them. And obviously, different languages, different ways of expressing are different frequencies. So human language, of course, is within a certain frequency band, the frequency band that the brain can decode, otherwise we wouldn't hear it. But within that frequency band are endless sub-frequencies that we call different languages. So I don't know about, in detail, the history of the Slovenian language, but I can talk about the principles. And I know for an absolute fact that those in the shadows manipulating human perception understand the power of words, both written and spoken, because the written word is just another version of this frequency field, giving off the same frequency. They know that through words, i.e. frequencies, they can program human perception. If you look at the actions of the European invaders of the world, not least the British, by the way, but other European countries that went off colonizing the world. When they got into these countries with ancient cultures like Aboriginals in Australia, etc., and Native Americans, they targeted those cultures in a bid to destroy them. They targeted the shamans to stop that vehicle for communicating ancient knowledge into future generations or generations today. And they targeted the language. How many countries that had their own language before the European invasion, not least the British invasion of the world, now speak English as the main language? And English and their original language are completely different frequencies. Now, you know, the psychopaths that went into these countries and slaughtered and killed and destroyed to take over, those people won't have a clue about any of this. But deep in the shadows, from where all this is orchestrated globally, they absolutely know all this. They just don't want us to know. Well, we're starting to. So while I can't talk about the Slovenian language in detail, I can point out the principle that languages are different frequencies. And there are certain frequencies that this cabal wants to be circulating, and there's certain frequencies they don't. So anywhere that a language is targeted for destruction and replacement by another, usually English, the alarm bell should ring about why that is happening. Let's see what else we've got. Yeah, I mean, this is a question about the role of Slovenia and its history and the Austro-Hungarian monarchy and Roman Empire and such like. And I've made a few quick notes yesterday. How Slovenia has been occupied by Italy, Austria, Hungary. Sorry, what am I saying? wrong list. How it's been occupied by Roman Empire, Holy Roman Empire, Habsburg dynasty, then Yugoslavia is mentioned here, and has also been occupied by Germany, Italy, and Hungary, which is in line with the first list. That was something else, and I see this a lot in countries in that area of the world where they have a whole history of occupation. Like, I was in Estonia recently, far to the north, and the same story was there. These smaller European countries have been occupied almost throughout their history. And when you look at some of the stuff in my books, the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, the Habsburg dynasty, etc., they're just expressions of the same force. And then there came a point after the breakup of Yugoslavia and also the breakup of the Soviet Union, where these countries gained what was described as independence. And a round of applause for that, because that's what life is about, isn't it? Being independent, yes, interdependent, we're all part of the same whole, but in the way that we experience, independent in the sense that we have freedom to decide the direction of our lives and our communities. But again and again and again and again, when you go through these countries that won independence, secured independence in theory, after the breakup, say, of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, they then handed back that independence without a bullet being fired. No need to send the tanks in to take over. You send the bureaucrats in. So, Slovenia became independent in 1991. In 2004, what's that? Just over 10 years of, no, not even that, less. No, yeah, that's right, just over 10 years. Just over 10 years of independence. And then they joined NATO and the EU in 2004. And NATO is a war machine. It's not a vehicle for peace, it's a vehicle for manipulating war. I said in a book called And the Truth Shall Set You Free, which I wrote the first edition in 1994, watch for NATO operating outside its designated area of the North Atlantic as it expands itself to become increasingly a world army. And that's exactly what's happened since. NATO bombing in Libya. What? What's that? Last time I looked at Libya, it weren't actually bordered by the North Atlantic. But Slovenia has joined NATO and thus now is part of that network, centrally controlled network. And it joined the European Union. I've been exposing the European Union decade after decade after decade and campaigned vigorously for Britain to come out. Of course, we won the vote in what was known as Brexit. Shocked the establishment, because the idea of the European Union is not to let countries go; it is to continually absorb more. And once they are absorbed, and the police are coming after me, then they're centrally dictated to, not even by elected people, but by dark suit bureaucrats in Brussels, dictating ever more the fine detail of people's lives all over Europe. I was in Croatia in the 2 or 3 years before they went into the European Union. And in that period, you had the Euro crisis and all that stuff, and they were still being pushed in by their politicians. And I said then that for Croatia to go into the European Union in those circumstances was like someone looking at a burning apartment block and asking when they can move in. It was crazy on the face of it. But there's method in the madness, because those controlling, ultimately, Croatian politics were pushing that agenda, even though it was terrible for the people. And I said on a mainstream television program there, before the vote to go in, that there were not tanks gathering on the Croatian borders, waiting for the vote to go in. There was a tidal wave of regulation, of law, and bureaucrats with briefcases waiting for the vote so that they could invade Croatia and transform Croatian society and take the place over. People voted, the majority voted, a lot didn't, a very large number didn't, but enough voted to go into the EU. Within a year, the stories were circulating out of Croatia at how they no longer controlled their own country. We had a prime minister before the present one called David Cameron, who had to resign when he lost the Brexit vote. And one of his advisors, a man called Steve Hilton, one of his advisors while he was prime minister, said later that David Cameron, Prime Minister of Britain, was finding out about laws, often that fundamentally affected British society. He was finding out about them on the television news. This is what the European Union is really about. Centrally dictating everything. Because if there's a few of you and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision making. The more points of decision making you have, the less power any central cabal has to dictate from the few to the many. Because there's so many points of decision making, you just can't keep control of it all. That's why they want the end of countries eventually, and to turn Europe into regions. And so what we have seen with the European Union is a vehicle to so centralize power that a handful of people at the center, all unelected, which vast overwhelming majority of people in Europe could not even name, deciding the fine detail of people's lives, what they can do, what they can't do. And of course, Brussels, where this crowd hang out, is now infamous for the number of lobby organizations located there, representing the interests of global corporations, to direct European law via the bureaucrats to suit them and not the people of Europe. So I think it's sad that so many countries that that fought so hard and so long to gain their independence after centuries of occupation and control should then hand that independence over to this bureaucratic fascism, bureaucratic communism, whichever term people prefer, because they're just two expressions of the same control anyway. And I do hope that more and more countries in the European Union will vote to come out. Not that I don't support cooperation between countries, I absolutely do. I'd have no problem with bodies that coordinated cooperation between countries, so everyone works together. That is very different from a European Union, and what they ultimately want is a world government that doesn't coordinate cooperation, but dictates from the center to everyone else. But in the end, we can talk about detail within the 5 sense reality, like I have just now with the European Union. But in the end, that's just a symptom. And to go beyond the symptoms of human control to the causes of human control, we have always got to go into the realm of consciousness and into the realm of human self-identity and human perception of reality. If we don't go there and change those perceptions, then nothing else can change. Hope that's okay, and look forward to seeing you in Slovenia not too long from now. Thanks very much. Bye.